Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you clicked on this video, chances are you're one of the millions of people who couldn't stop thinking about a single short comment Megan Thee Stallion made in GQ. A comment that looked simple on the surface, but turned out to be anything but simple. So here's how the story goes. February 2026. GQ drops their March issue with a cover that, okay, let's be real, had already sent the internet into a frenzy before anyone even read the actual content. Why? Because on that cover stood 7 men who, if you're an army, probably had you reaching for a tissue without even realizing it. BTS. Complete. All 7. After how long? Years. We all know just how historic that is. But hold on, because that's not actually what brought us here today. Inside that same GQ issue, there was a comment. Short, but, and this is the part that personally had me sitting back and just processing for a moment. That comment came from Megan Thee Stallion. And that comment mentioned Jimin. Personally, specifically, not BTS in general, not K-pop as a whole, Jimin. And now here we all are talking about the same thing. Is this just another celebrity compliment? Or is this the beginning of something much, much bigger? Get comfortable. This is going to be a long one. And I promise, you won't want to skip a single part. Okay, before we dive deeper, we need to have a conversation about something crucial. Because in order for you to truly understand why Megan's comment is not something we can just brush off, you first need to know, who exactly is Megan Thee Stallion? Her name is Megan Jovan Ruth Pete, born and raised in Houston, Texas. And it was from Houston that she brought something to the table that permanently changed the landscape of American hip-hop. If you thought hip-hop was always going to be dominated by certain names, certain sounds, certain faces, Megan Thee Stallion walked in and proved every single one of those assumptions wrong. She entered the industry without asking for permission, without asking for space. She built her own space, and then filled it to the absolute brim with an energy nobody could deny. Her songs, from Savage to Body to WAP with Cardi B, all the way to the string of hits that kept coming after, aren't just tracks that feel good to listen to. Every Megan song is a statement, a declaration of who she is, what she believes, how she sees the world, and how she wants the world to see her back. And the most important thing for the context of today's video is this. Megan Thee Stallion is not the kind of artist who hands out compliments cheaply. She knows the value of her words. She knows the weight she carries in this industry. When she speaks, people across the entire global music industry listen. Not because they have to, but because they know Megan never says anything without a reason. So when this woman, with all that credibility, with all that track record, sits down in a GQ interview and mentions ParkJimin's name, you're starting to understand why this became such a massive conversation, right? Now let's talk about Jimin. And please, if any of you are still thinking of Jimin as one of the 7 guys from BTS and nothing more, allow me to shift your perspective today. ParkJimin is an artist, and I'm using that word with its full weight, not lightly. In 2024, Jimin released his first solo album, Muse. And if you haven't listened to that album from beginning to end, I strongly encourage you to do that after watching this video. Because Muse isn't an album that was made to please charts or feed algorithms. Muse is an album built to tell a story about who Jimin is, about what he's felt, about the long journey of a human being who has lived under the glare of cameras since he was a teenager. From that album, one song emerged as a phenomenon of its own. Who? As of mid-February 2026, and this is an official Spotify figure, who has crossed 2.3 billion streams. 2.3 billion. Without active promotion. Without a tour. Jimin was in the middle of mandatory military service, while those numbers kept climbing, consistently, every single day. And that's just one piece of it. Jimin's brand index for February 2026 sits at number 1 among all boy group individual members in Korea, up 29.62% compared to the previous month. His collaboration with Dior, the French luxury house that has positioned itself as one of the most prestigious fashion institutions in the world, continues to generate what people are now calling the Jimin effect. An $8,000 bag sells out globally within minutes simply because Jimin was spotted carrying it at an airport. But you know what makes all of those achievements truly meaningful? It's not the numbers. It's not the charts. It's not the commercial value. What makes it meaningful is the fact that behind all of it is a man who has genuinely grown as an artist. who came back from the experience of mandatory military service with a far deeper understanding of himself than before, who now speaks about being more open than ever to experimentation, to taking artistic risks, to exploring territory he's never touched before. And that's where everything starts getting very, very interesting. Because this Jimin, the bolder one, the more open one, the one who's ready to surprise the world, is the exact same Jimin whose name was singled out by Megan Thee Stallion in GQ's March 2026 issue. Okay, now we get to the heart of everything, the GQ moment itself. February 13th, 2026. GQ drops their March issue digitally. And as I mentioned earlier, BTS complete on that cover was already enough to break the internet. But what was happening inside the pages of that GQ issue turned out to carry far more surprises than anyone had predicted. In one section of the BTS feature story, the GQ editors included comments from major names across the global music industry about BTS, about what this group means to them, about how BTS has changed the landscape of world music. And among the names giving those comments was Megan Thee Stallion. Now, the majority of comments from the other artists were general. They praised BTS as a group. They spoke about BTS's impact collectively. What Megan did was different. She chose to name someone specifically, and the name she chose was Jimin. Her words, personal, deep, and, for anyone who knows how to read the language of this industry, not something that felt like it had been drafted by a PR team. This felt like a comment that came from someone who genuinely knew exactly what they were talking about. The reaction, it happened in minutes. X, formerly Twitter, immediately exploded. Within the first 24 hours of that article spreading across the internet, the combined names of Jimin and Megan Thee Stallion were trending worldwide. Not in one or two countries, worldwide. And the most astonishing part of this entire situation wasn't how fast it spread. It was how two fandom communities that are usually very protective and very separate reacted in a way absolutely no one expected. ARMY and Hotties, two fandoms that when they meet on the internet tend to clash more than they cooperate, suddenly united, sharing clips with each other, introducing each other to new music, supporting the same dream together. If you've ever witnessed how rare it is for two major fandoms to genuinely get along, you know exactly how remarkable that moment was. And in the middle of all that noise, one question kept surfacing from every direction. Is this just a comment? Or is something far more real already happening behind the scenes? Okay, I know some of you might still be skeptical, and that's completely valid. We've all seen one artist compliment another in the media enough times that the pattern is familiar. The hype runs hot for a week, then everything moves on and nothing actually happens. But let me give you a few reasons why Megan's comment about Jimin is different from the standard industry praise we're all used to seeing. First, the context. This is not an Instagram story that disappears after 24 hours. This is not a tweet that could have been posted on impulse. This is GQ, a magazine with a rigorous editorial process. Every quote that appears in GQ has gone through layers of verification, confirmation, and approval. When your words appear in GQ, you know exactly what you're saying and exactly why you're saying it. Second, the specificity. I need you to really pay attention to this one. Among all the comments in that GQ feature, Megan was the only one who specifically named one individual, not the group. Jimin, not BTS collectively. Jimin specifically. That is not an accident. That is a very deliberate, very conscious choice. Third, Megan's own track record. If you study Megan Thee Stallion's career carefully, one thing you'll notice almost immediately is this. Her collaborations always have a reason. She has never collaborated with someone just because of label pressure or because of popularity. Every Megan collaboration is one she truly believes in. Cardi B, two forces that amplify each other. Beyoncé, mutual respect between icons. And if she's now starting to speak about Jimin in a personal, specific way, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Fourth, and this might be the most important one from an industry standpoint, the timing of his comment. Jimin is at the most transformative moment of his career. He's just finished mandatory military service. He's preparing for BTS's comeback with the era-rang album, ready to shake the world. He has just proven himself as a solo artist with abilities that far exceed expectations. This isn't a moment where people are praising Jimin because he's at the peak of his fame. This is a moment where people are praising Jimin because they're genuinely seeing his true potential. And Megan Thee Stallion saw it. In GQ. In front of millions of readers. And she chose to say it out loud. Now let's get into the most exciting question. If this collaboration actually happened, would it make musical sense? Or is this just a beautiful dream that would produce something genuinely strange if it were ever realized? I'll be honest with you. The first time I really sat with this question, my initial reaction was doubt. Jimin and Megan? Completely different worlds. Jimin is associated with delicate melodies, emotionally charged vocals, cinematic dance pop. Megan is associated with aggressive rap, heavy beats, unapologetically bold hip-hop. But then I sat with the question longer. And I started listening to both of them differently. And I started noticing something. Contrast, when handled intelligently, is the most powerful fuel in the history of music. Every great collaboration that has ever existed, the ones that enter the canon of iconic moments we all still talk about to this day, almost all of them were born from the collision of two different worlds. Hip-hop meeting jazz, electronic meeting acoustic, K-pop meeting Western pop. Every time those two worlds touched in just the right way, the result was something that neither world could have created on its own. Now picture this. Jimin's vocals, which can move from an intimate whisper to a full emotional explosion in a matter of seconds, layered over a hip-hop beat built for Megan. Or flip it, Megan's raw, unfiltered energy lifting a track that starts from Jimin's cinematic melody. Are you starting to hear it? In your head? I'm pretty sure you are. And this isn't just about sound. It's about storytelling. Megan is an extraordinary storyteller. Every lyric she writes is a narrative about strength, about identity, about refusing to be diminished. Jimin is also a storyteller, but in a different way. More internal, more vulnerable, more about the journey inward toward the self. Those two different storytelling approaches, brought together with the right production, could create something that on one side displays Megan's external power, and on the other reveals Jimin's internal depth. A duality. And in music, when duality works, it's the thing that's hardest to forget. There's one dimension of this potential collaboration that I think rarely gets talked about. And honestly, I think this dimension is the most important one of all. Both Jimin and Megan Thee Stallion are two artists who have been through serious, heavy trials in their lives and careers. Not like tests. Not minor drama. Real, heavy, public trials. Megan went through a series of challenges that were extremely public and extremely painful. Things I don't need to recount in detail here, because those of you who followed her story already know. What matters is this. At every single one of those hardest moments, Megan responded the same way. She made music. Music that was stronger. Music that was more honest. Music that proved she could not be broken. Jimin, in his own very different way, also knows what it feels like to carry weight that's genuinely heavy. Years of being part of a group where the expectations reach sky high, then facing a long hiatus, then mandatory military service that separated him from everything he knew. And through all of it, continuing to create, continuing to grow, continuing to prove that he is not just a product of a system, he is a true artist. That shared experience, even though the paths were completely different, could become a remarkably powerful foundation for creativity. Because when two artists who have each walked through their own version of fire meet in a studio, what they bring isn't just skill. They bring wounds. They bring victories. They bring an understanding of what it means to survive. And that is the fuel for the most memorable music. Music that isn't just pleasant to hear, but music that is truly, deeply felt. So, back to the question we've been carrying through this entire video. From GQ to the recording studio. Is that where all of this is headed? Honestly, I don't know. And anyone who tells you they definitely know, probably doesn't know either. The music industry doesn't work in predictable ways. A major collaboration can happen within months of the first signal. Or it can take years. Or it can never materialize at all, even when every single sign seems to be pointing toward it. But here's what I do know for certain. Megan Thee Stallion's comment about Jimin in GQ's March 2026 issue is not something that can be ignored. Not by the industry, not by music labels, not by producers who always have the most finely tuned antenna for the potential collaborations that could genuinely change the game. And certainly not by all of us sitting here talking about it today. Because in a world where attention is the most valuable currency, And where small signals from major artists are often the very first step in a journey that turns out to be much larger, that comment was already enough to make the world start paying attention. And if one day, whether next month, whether a year from now, whether whenever, a song that brings together the names Jimin and Megan Thee Stallion is finally played for the first time for the whole world to hear, we will all look back at this moment, at that GQ interview, at the comment that seemed brief but turned out to be the seed of something extraordinary. The journey from GQ to the recording studio may have only just begun. And I, for the first time in a long while, am genuinely, deeply excited to wait and see where it ends. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, drop a comment, share it, you know the drill. And if there's a topic about Jimin, BTS, or the global music world that you want us to cover in the next video, write it in the comments. I read every single one. See you in the next one. Take care.